Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this lecture about the Child and Family Services in Manitoba. And we are honored to have with us today a guest who is Mr. Jay Rodgers, who is the CEO of the General Child and Family Services Authority in Manitoba. It's a privilege to have Mr. Rodgers here with us and to provide us with information about CFS. We hear this term a lot. Some of us are afraid or scared when they hear the word CFS, or that they're called by CFS, and they wonder what's going to happen because some systems in our countries does not exist similar to this one. So we thank Mr. Rodgers or Jay, as he gave me the privilege to call him as such, for joining us on a Saturday, taking this time from his time and giving us this information. Jay, thanks very much for joining us.
Very glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Jay. I guess to start, we want to just, if you can let us know, what is Child and Family Services Manitoba, your provision, especially the General Child, Family and Services Manitoba. What does it stand for and why did it exist?
Yeah, sure. So Child and Family Services is a system that exists in all parts of Canada. Every province has Child and Family Services legislation, also referred to as child welfare legislation. There is similar legislation all across North America, and Manitoba has had legislation for Child and Family Services for well over 100 years. There are two foundational concepts related to our legislation that really determine how we work with families. And those two are, one, this notion of safety, child safety. In our Child and Family Services Act, safety is paramount. So our number one consideration as a service system is ensuring that kids are safe and doing well and thriving. That's our mandate, as we call it. And the second concept in the legislation that really matters is this notion of the best interest of the child. So all of the decisions that we make as a service system have to be vetted through these two lenses. One, are we helping to ensure kids are safe? And two, are we always acting in the best interests of the child? So those are important to put out front as sort of the foundational principles in our legislation. And that's pretty consistent in all Child and Family Services legislation. Now, just let me talk a little bit about how the Child and Family Services system is organized in Manitoba, so people on the call can get a better sense of who I am and what my organizations do. So, in Manitoba, we actually have a very, very unique structure for the delivery of Child and Family Services. That structure that we have arose out of a major initiative from 2000 to 2005 that was called devolution. And the purpose of devolution was to return control of Child and Family Services for Indigenous children and families to Indigenous people. So that was the whole purpose of that major initiative. It was probably the most significant reorganization or restructuring of child welfare in Manitoba's history. It was completed over a 5 to 6 year period. What it resulted in was the creation of brand new organizations in Manitoba that had never existed here before. And those are called Child and Family Services Authorities. So there are 4 CFS authorities. I'm the CEO of one of them. The other 3 are what are known as Indigenous authorities. So under the Child and Family Services Authorities Act, each of us has primary responsibility for serving certain families across the province. We all have a province-wide mandate, so it's what's known as a concurrent jurisdiction system. So I'll just let you know who the other 3 authorities are. There's the Child and Family Services Authority of Northern Manitoba. So for families who are affiliated or connected or registered with First Nations communities in the north, they their primary service provider is agencies mandated by that authority.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
is the Métis Authority. So for families who are affiliated with a Métis community, they should be getting their child and family services from agencies mandated by the Métis Authority. Then there is the Southern First Nations Network of Care, or also known as the Southern Authority. And their primary mandate is to have agencies serve families who are affiliated, connected, or registered with Southern First Nations communities.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth one, the General Child and Family Services Authority that I'm responsible for.
Yep.
In our act, it says we're responsible for serving all families who aren't being served by the other three authorities.
Yes, right.
So essentially, we're primarily responsible for non-Indigenous families, and we are the primary provider for sure for newcomers, families new to Canada. They will get their services from us. As an authority, I'm an oversight body and a funding body. So I have legal powers, I have legal obligations that are quite extensive. But what I do is I mandate, fund, and oversee what are called mandated agencies. So the actions that we can take under our legislation can only be taken by an agency that has a quote unquote mandate. Mm-hmm. So I'm responsible for giving organizations that mandate across the province to serve the children and families that we're supposed to be serving under the Authorities Act. So the General Authority itself doesn't deliver services directly. It's through my agencies. And so I have agencies, I have a big agency in Winnipeg, a big agency in rural and northern Manitoba that serves the rural and remote areas. I've got a medium-sized agency in Brandon that serves western Manitoba. I've got a smaller agency in Portage, which serves central Manitoba. And then I've got one other agency called Jewish Child and Family Services. So that's kind of how we're set up in Manitoba very quickly. That's kind of who the General Authority is. And that's sort of what our responsibility is. And again, as an authority, I have legal powers, as do my agencies. And, need to be upfront with this. Our agencies have considerable powers to act in the best interest of children.
Of course.
And that includes the ability to remove children from their caregivers. But I will say, after having said that, we only do that as a last resort. It is the most intrusive action our system can take. And we train our staff, we train our agencies to know when children might need to be apprehended. And again, it is only as a last resort.
Absolutely. And I think I want to go back to a term or a concept you've used, and most of our listeners will not be familiar with it. We will be familiar with it in the legal field, which is what's in the best interest of the child. And that term is used with Child and Family Services. It's also used in courts and family disputes when they're looking for custody. And I just want to tell everybody, when Jay's saying they act on what's in the best interest of the child, that means when they're interviewing a family, they really don't. It's not that they don't care about the best interest of the parents, but their only mandate is what's in the best interest of the child. So the parents should not be offended by that. This is basically the agency's mandate, if I'm correct, Jay.
Yes, for sure. And that authority to act in the best interest of the child, and again, that's our primary interest. We've had that mandate for many years in our system. It's there's a parents patria, I think, is the concept. We can intervene on behalf of the child and do what we need to do to make sure that child is safe.
Yeah. And when we talk about the best interest of the child, that means when the child is under the care of a guardian. Could be a parent, could be another guardian, anybody who's actually looking after the child in this case, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So what happens in the case that the agency receives a complaint or an allegation about the child's well-being?
Okay, so another important point to understand about Manitoba's laws is that we are what's known as a mandatory reporting jurisdiction. And so in our Child and Family Services Act, it sets out that if anyone and it's literally anyone,
Yeah.
believes a child is or might be in need of protection, they're required in our laws to report that. And in 99% of the time, it's reported to a child and family services agency. They can also report to the police. They can also report to the parent. But most of the time, it's someone calling our agency. So that's an important point to remember. That's required by law of all citizens. The only exception is solicitor-client privilege. So even if you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a counselor or a school teacher, and you're talking to a child one-on-one, if that child tells you they're being abused or harmed, that person has to report it. So what do we do when we get a report? We have a screening process at all of our agencies that do intake, and there's one central point of intake across in all regions of the province. We will screen it to see if it starts to meet what we call the threshold. And the threshold is set out rather broadly in Section 17 of the Child and Family Services Act, which defines what a child in need of protection is. And it lists examples of when a child may be in need of protection. It's not the best section. It's old. It really needs to be modernized, but that's what we have to work with. So our initial screening is to determine, does it look like there's a child out there who may have been harmed or may be in danger? We get lots of calls that we don't go out on. It's looking for information. It's not a child welfare related matter. There's not enough information for us to believe that a child has been harmed or is in danger. But if it crosses what I'm referring to as the threshold based on the definition in Section 17, we're required to go out. It's in our law. It's non-discretionary. We can't get a report about a child being hurt and say we're too busy tonight. We can't go out, or we don't feel like going out. We have to. It's a statutory response.
It's a zero tolerance policy. You have to do it.
We have to do it, and initially, because of the paramountcy of child safety, it is going to feel like an investigation, because the first thing we have to do is assess safety. That's if we have worries about a kid who might be in need of protection, we have to establish safety first. Now I can talk a little bit about how we do that. And
sure, that was my next question. Yeah.
So it's really important that when we are looking at child safety, that we assess safety objectively, without bias and without judgment, and consistently. So and it's really critical that we only look at those factors that are resulting in children being safe or not. We deal with a lot of complex families who've got lots going on, but we need to focus on, is this kid safe? And so we actually have a standardized assessment tool that we use, that we adopted a number of years ago. It's called the Structured Decision-Making Safety Assessment. And its purpose is to ensure the three things I talked about. One, that these assessments are done objectively. Two, we're only looking at the information that matters to child safety. And three, we're trying to arrive at a safety decision. So when staff of my agencies go out and do an investigation, they use the safety assessment, and the safety assessment requires them to reach one of three decisions. One decision, this kid is safe. Everything's fine. It's a good family. The allegations don't appear to be founded. Kid is well cared for. Parents are attentive. And if we conclude a child is safe, we will likely we'll probably close the file. Like we won't continue to work with that family. The second decision that can be made through a safety assessment, which is made very often, is the child's not safe, but can be made safe within the family. And so what we do then is we work with the family to establish protective capacity. We'll look at establishing safety networks, mobilizing friends, family, neighbors, service providers in the community members to create safety networks with families. And we'll work with the family to collaboratively create a safety plan so that the parents know what they need to do. They know what their network needs to do to ensure that the child remains safe. So
Hmm.
these would be families that we would be worried about, but we don't necessarily need to bring their kids into care. And like I said, we make that decision on the safety assessment very often. And we would keep that file open, and we would keep that file open to make sure that the safety plan we've created with the family is implemented. And if there's a safety network, that they're supporting the family until such time as ongoing safety has been established. And then we would close that file. The last one, and the most difficult decision, is the child is not safe and
Right,
cannot immediately be made safe.
right.
And in those situations, our act requires us to make sure that children are safe. And if we reach that conclusion, we're likely apprehending.
Okay.
And I can tell you, um, just for interest, the number of kids we've apprehended has dropped by close to 40% in the last 4 years, and I believe it's because our system is working with families differently than we used to. So apprehensions are down, and we're finding more often than not we're leaving kids with families and working with families to address the worries we have.
And Jay, that's an excellent point that you make, and I want to maybe emphasize on this with the audience that the impression that they have, or most people have, especially from our community, is that child and family services is there to get the children. They're there to try and take your or steal your children away, which is not correct. And it's important that they listen to this from the source. That this is not correct. Yes, there are some cases where apprehension is needed, and it's to be placed in a safe care, but that's not the mandate of the agency, if I'm correct.
Yeah. So let me just give you a figure that sometimes startles people. So on any given day across the province, my agencies are working with about 5,000 kids.
That's true.
Close to 80% of those kids are at home with their parents, and we're supporting the family staying together. Of those 5,000 kids, maybe 900 are in care. So most of what we do is keeping families together. I can also tell you that in those circumstances where we have to apprehend, we have a principle in our system that is reunification starts on the day of the apprehension. So when we apprehend a kid, our highest priority and our number one priority is always, can we get this kid back home with his or her parents?
Correct.
And that will always be the first thing we consider.
Okay. So on that point, and when we talk about the word apprehension, it scares a lot of people, a lot of parents, because they feel their connections with the child is interrupted or maybe terminated permanently. So just on that point, whoever's listening, and again, I'm just repeating what Jay has said. The point or the goal is to try and reunite after making sure that the child is safe. This is the main point, is not to try and as I've heard it sometimes, steal the kids or take the kids away from the parents. That's not the idea. On that point, Jay, if an agency or a CFS worker decides that an apprehension is needed, in this case, what is the steps that usually happen in that case?
Yeah. So when a decision is made to apprehend a child, the first consideration that the agency will think about is so we can't leave this child with his or her parents or guardians. We have to find a different place for the kid to be, at least temporarily, because of what's going on. The first thing we consider is, can we find family to care for the kid while we work with the parents or guardians to get the kid back home. So we'll always look for, grandparents, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, someone in the family who's
On the same
familiar with
family.
these kids. If it's not family, someone in maybe the family knows, who's familiar with the kid. We always want to not put children into what we call stranger placements. So that's
Mhm.
always our first consideration. But in those circumstances, we would be looking for the child to be living with someone else, and again, at least temporarily. We have lots of times we'll get called out on a Friday night, and there's a crazy situation going on. We got to take some young kids into care, and Monday they can go back home because the crazy situation's been resolved. Parents have stabilized. So a lot of times it's short term. But again, whether it's a couple of days, a couple of months, or a year and a half, if we can get the kids back to family, we will.
Awesome. Now, in some circumstances, when I'm dealing with clients, they'll inform me that the worker, the child and family service worker, or sometimes I think they're called case workers, they would approach the child at school directly before coming to school to home, or speaking with the parents beforehand. I just want the audience to know that this is within the powers of the agency, that they actually can speak with the child directly. They don't need the permission of the parents to do so.
That's correct. A lot of times, that's going to depend on the seriousness of the allegation and the urgency of the response.
Mhm.
So, if we get a call from a school that a kid has come with bruises all over and looks to be have experienced significant harm, and the kid is saying, "My dad did this," I mean, we're going out right away and we're talking to that kid.
Absolutely.
If we get a call saying, I'm worried about this youngster, it doesn't look like there's enough food in the home, it doesn't appear to be, wearing proper winter clothes, I mean, we'll go out and talk to the parents. So
Yeah.
it depends on the urgency and the severity of the allegation, for sure.
Yeah, and this is some of the misunderstanding or misconception about that nobody can talk to my child without my permission. I mean, that especially for newcomer families, the same system does not exist in their back homes, but in here, this actually is within the power of the agency to do so.
That's correct.
Um,
Yep.
another misconception I always find is that when the agency comes home or wants to speak with the parents, some parents will say, I'm not going to talk to you. I have nothing to say to you," and they stop from cooperating, or they are afraid of talking to the agency. So that kind of prevents the worker from doing what they need to do. So what do you do in those cases?
Well, again, we've got to act in the best interest of the child. So if we go to a house and again, it depends on the urgency and seriousness of the allegation. So if we get an allegation that a child has been significantly hurt and is in danger, and we go to the house and we can't get access, chances are we're coming back with the police and we're going in to see the kid. If it's not an immediate danger situation, we may come back and try the parents again, or we may go talk to the kid at school the next day.
Okay. Which is to make sure that, number one, safety is in place, that the child is safe, there's no negligence, there's no abandonment, there's no physical or sexual abuse, and so on.
That's right.
So that's important for the audience to realize and know, that having to exercise your powers by going directly to the child, which is something that parents are not used to, because in our system, in our society, even if the child needs to have a tooth taken out or visit to the doctor, they need to get the permission from the parents. Having that power taken away from the parents is something that's scary to many people, especially many parents. But this is needed in order to make sure that the child is safe. And what, as you said, Jay, the idea is not to try and punish the parents, but to try and educate them and correct the situation immediately, making sure that the child is looked after in the meanwhile.
Yeah. The other point I'd like to make here is, and if we have to apprehend a kid and our plan is reunification, or if we are able to help the family care for the kid at home, but we have worries about the family and making sure the kid remains safe. In either circumstance, we always want to include the parents and guardians in the development of the case plan. We consider community and parents and guardians as partners with us, as co-creators of case plans. And our experience is, if that parents and guardians and communities feel that they that they are partners with us, that creates a common objective, and it creates it creates a way of working with families that what the word I'm looking for, really gets families motivated to work with us to keep their kids safe. For sure. We always want to, whenever possible, we always want families to see us as partners, not, even if we've had to take your kid, we'll explain why that had to happen. will explain what we need to see in order to get the kid back, and let's co-create something now that will help us do that. So it's called the dual mandate of child welfare. So on one hand, we're the bad guys, we have to investigate. On the other hand, once we make a decision about safety, we're inviting you into the process with us.
And I have to say, from dealing with the agency for a very long period of time, there has been some changes over the years, especially in the last 5 years or 6 years. There has been a lot of changes, and not to undermine the authority or the power of the agency, but it's less scary today than it was 10 years ago in people's mind. Because now I find from my practice, there's a lot of emphasis, there's a lot of focus on trying to work cooperatively, trying to create a safe atmosphere, and listening more and more to the parents. It's a very amazing thing that I've seen over the years, for sure.
Yeah, and I know I mean, people can be fearful of our system. I get that and I understand why. But the reality is, if families are struggling, what happens is families tend to deteriorate to the point where by the time we get the call, we kind of have to take that intrusive action. Whereas if we could have gotten involved earlier and provided supports, and we have lots of ability to provide supports to families through our system, we could have probably stabilized the family and then helped ensure ongoing safety at home. So the earlier that we can work with families, the better for everybody.
I want to. This is an amazing point, Jay, because it's not one of the questions I had, but it's actually raising a question, very important question. How does a parent or a guardian feel safe contacting the agency about something that they feel they need help with, without jeopardizing losing the child, without having the fear? If I see they want help, they need help. Maybe it's anger management, maybe it's I don't know, child safety within the house, that things that he doesn't or she doesn't know what's safe measurements for young children to have in the house. They have no education, they just came in as newcomers, so they need help. But in the same time, they're worried if they seek help and a worker comes over, that they might just take the children away, and then this way they would have shot themselves in the foot. How do they approach this? What would they do?
Well, it's a tricky answer, because we can never say 100% we're not going to apprehend your kid, right? Because we have to do the safety assessment. So it's about understanding what constitutes abuse. It's about understanding what constitutes neglect and what a child in need of protection means. And just because a child might be in need of protection, it doesn't necessarily mean we're apprehending. It's working with the family to create safety, and that's always our number one objective. But we could never say, don't worry about calling us, we're not going to take your kid. But I find we're more and more often working with families when they come to our attention earlier and creating those safety plans. And my agencies are very skilled at creating what I refer to as safety networks, because we know that natural supports, rather than agency intervention, is what's going to keep kids safe. And we can't be there all the time, but networks can. Networks can be there for families and parents and guardians. So we've really shifted our practice to really emphasize, when we have ongoing worries about a family, can we mobilize a safety network to support that family?
Amazing. Now, if the child has siblings, few siblings with them in the same house, and an allegation is about one of the children, or this child in particular, an investigation is done and there's concerns about the safety of the child. So unfortunately, there is a temporary order of apprehension for this child. Does it mean automatically that his siblings or her siblings will be also apprehended?
No, it doesn't. Children have their own protective capacities. So we know that if we have a very young infant who appears to have been abused, that young infant's not verbal, the young infant doesn't have the ability to self-protect. That young infant could have a 14-year-old sibling who we interview and does not disclose any abuse, is well cared for, and also has the ability to, if things get nasty in the house, to leave. So much more self-protective capacity, in that sibling, we probably wouldn't apprehend that sibling. It's all based on the safety of, and the safety assessment looks at the safety of individual children in the household.
Okay. If a child is investigated or the case is investigated and the child is insisting or saying, I want to go back home, I want to, he's apprehended or she's apprehended, I want to go back home and so on, does that take any weight in the decision of the CFS worker?
Well, for sure. Generally, well, let me talk legally first. Legally, any child 12 or over has the right under our act to have his or her views considered in any actions taken by the agency, and any petitions to the court. A child 12 years or over could have independent counsel if he or she wanted. Having said that, we always want to hear the views of the child when we're developing how we're going to work with the family. And in fact, my agencies have specific tools that we use to animate the voice of children. So, and it's very powerful way of getting families and parents sort of engaged with us is when they hear what their kids are saying happen to them. And so the more that we can animate the voice of the child, if the kid says, like, I don't want to be here, I want to be back home, absolutely, we will help that child explain why that may not be possible now, but we'll help that child understand that that's our goal too.
Okay. Any other points, Jay, you would like to make or add to inform our audience about your agency, about your role? And by the way, we are very excited to have you in here, and we look forward to more lectures that I'll be having with you or anyone from your agency, because our goal is to educate the community at large and our new community here in Manitoba. So any other words, any last words you'd like to add, please?
Just maybe a couple of things. One is if families are engaged with our system and they're unhappy with the service that they're getting, each agency has a sort of complaint process. And if it's not resolved satisfactorily at the agency, the role of the authority is to then hear hear about the complaint and work with the people who may not be happy. So there's also the Office of the Children's Advocate that people can contact to see if the advocate can be supportive. And we work really well with the advocate's office. Just that meetings like this, I find, are incredibly important. The more information we can get out about how our system works, the better. So I'm more than happy to come back if there are specific areas you would like me to talk about. I didn't talk about our risk assessment process, for example. I'd be happy to come back and talk about that. And if there are ways that communities can help us find family placements, help us create safety networks, I'm more than happy to have my agencies engage with community leadership to talk about ways we might do that, for sure.
Actually, that's an amazing point, because we had questions similar to this one, and I was just going to ask you, if our community is very new community, very young compared to other communities here in Canada, but if we were in a position as a community to create foster homes, Arabic foster homes, with that, and the children, especially newcomers, are in need of staying within the same culture, is this something that the agency would look at?
Absolutely. So if we can't find family members when we bring a kid into care, a member of the community would be our next choice, right?
Great. Jay, thank you so much for being here. It's a Saturday. I know the weather outside is cold, but still, this is your weekend, so I really appreciate your time here. You've been wonderful you've been very informative. You've been wonderful to have with us. And I'll take you in your invitation. I will definitely reach out to you again for future lectures that's going to be more specific about certain areas. And I think it's very important to build this bridge between CFS and our community at large, and also the Arabic community and the Muslim community, to try and delete those fears and clear the picture and see how can we work cooperatively together to always ensure the best safety and well-being of our children for sure.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll mention one more thing. We have a video on the General Authority website called Sounds Through the Wall. And it is a video that tries to explain sort of many of the points I was talking about in terms of how we work with families. And it's available in multiple languages on the website. So it might be something you want to look into. And yeah, for sure, if I know you're having further conversations after I leave, if there's more questions that come out that you want me to respond to, you can just follow up with me. And anytime you want me to come back, I'm extremely happy to do so.
We will always be happy. I'll be always happy to have you back in any broadcast I have. This has been great, and again, I really want to thank you for your time and your generosity with information. I personally, even though I've been working with the agency for a long time, I personally feel even more comfortable working with the agency in the future. So it's great to you've been a very great source of information. I much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Very glad to do it.